James is working on a project for the mass parade. I've got the soil model that I'll be going in, that I've shown to the Climate Forum. That'll be going into an exhibition up in Whangarei towards the end of the year, and we're hoping to get the Climate Forum involved in a further project that will happen next year, which is all around education and educating in terms of the soil model. And I proposed a couple of projects. One was an art project around really getting people to think about their own personal journey in this, and it was sort of titled tell me you did everything, tell me that you did everything you could, and really just looking at yourself. It was based on an artwork I saw in Auckland, so there'll be more on that. But a fun one that I proposed yesterday was around perhaps doing a book, a tongue-in-cheek book, a bit like the Ladybird book, on sort of how to catch a bus and how to prepare yourself for doing without a car. So I think there could be some really fun ideas around that. So yeah, anyway, just hop on to Twist and you'll see some of the projects that we've been talking about there.
They sound enormously attractive, John Paul, and I mean, yeah, I hope that we'll hear more about the mask parade idea too. Sati, Jill, would you like to tell your little story?
Fine. I'm wondering about how we recognize success. And what I'm noticing is small incremental improvements and co-benefits, some of which come out of lockdown. I find that changing easy habits results in co-benefits in other areas. And since the first lockdown, many of us do most of our shopping by bike. And I've realized how much this shifts society. We stop and talk to friends. We have conversations around the bike rack and admiring all the family bikes and things like that. And recently I was chatting to people whilst loading up my bike at the supermarket, and there were loads of other bikes there. And two of the young staff commented on how many people are shopping by bike under lockdown, and they observed that it was so people could get their exercise and their shopping at the same time. And what I'm finding is so many sort of casual conversations often lead to green concerns with people I wouldn't normally expect to be having environmental conversations with, and it feels like we're greening the mainstream. We're reaching a social tipping point where it's acceptable to discuss these things, because for a long time, we've felt embarrassed or marginalized for sort of having these concerns. People are realizing that changes they've made through lockdown can improve the quality of their life, like walks with the family, quieter roads, cleaner air, cooking with family, working from home. And I think by recognizing these little changes, and because they have co-benefits, we're moving much more into win-win situations. And I don't believe that recognizing success is denial of the size of the problem. But enjoying small successes, I think, empowers us to open our fork more. And one thing I've tried to do and failed, but I shall work harder on, is there is a fantastic podcast called Outrage and Optimism, which is by Christiana Figueres, who is the architect of the Paris Agreement. And I find it so well informed and so realistic. But they interview all sorts of people from business, environment, politics, that one realizes the speed of change is getting enormous. And when I'm feeling despondent about environmental things, I listen to them, and some of them are very sort of serious and scary, but I always come back enthused. When I might ask Anya if I totally fail to get the link onto the website, but there are over 100 of them now, and they're fantastic. And one small thing, can I say, I saw Sophie Weinick. She was on telly on the Good as Gold program, cleaning out the Mai Tai and providing food packages. So congratulations, Sophie.
Thumbs up to Sati and to Sophie. And now we have 4 people, and I'm going to extend this by a few minutes. So Bruno, then Julie, then Tord, then Karen. And Jack, my goodness, okay. Fairly succinct, please. Bruno.
Kia ora, everyone. Can you hear me all right? I'm breaking up a bit. Okay. Our submission blitz is hopefully just about finished. I would like to really thank the Ning team and the site stewards and the communication group, and particularly Anne, to actually get some suggestions I made on submissions onto the website. We're moving on to very quickly onto putting up an action plan to get people out of cars into active transport and public transport. And we're not quite ready for that, but I'll bring that up at the next hui. I'd like to really acknowledge Kate Malcolm for an amazing letter she sent out to Jacinda Ardern about the climate issues. And I'm just wondering whether we can put those sort of letters, we've encouraged her to publish it to the Nelson Mail. I'm just wondering whether we can put letters like that, that highlight individuals that may not necessarily be in the main team, whether we can put them also onto Ning somewhere. So at least the people will see the recognition there. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge Hilary Blundell, because he's working with the Ministry of Transport on a Smart Roads user app. And I'll have more news for that next time. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bruno, for all your work on transport. Julie.
I organised a play centre, my local play centre that my boy goes to plant a mini food forest in the last month. And the play centre paid for none of it. So thank you to the councils and to Bunnings and to Waimea Nurseries for making us not pay for anything.
Well done, Julie. Well done. Tord.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I just want to report that David Eyre and I took part in a meeting at Nelson City Council about the methods and plans for calculating the carbon footprint, not just of the council itself, but of everyone who lives in the council. And I think we made progress. And the idea is that a more detailed work will be carried out by the council with experts that they engage in this. And of course, hopefully this will drive decision making in the direction of greenhouse gas reduction in the region. But I should also point out the conclusion by the IPCC report of the need for immediate and substantial reductions of emissions. It really means that our two councils should be working with the farming industry and landowners to see to what extent revisions of how the land is used for farming can help us reduce the greenhouse gases. And it may involve in reducing the number of cows and sheep. And of course, this is what has to happen in order to achieve proper greenhouse gas emission reductions. A second point, just also to highlight the fact that Bruno and I and our colleagues in the climate heat Impact Research Center here in Mapua, we are working with the World Health Organization and making input into their report for the COP26 in Glasgow. And I think that even as we are in a small country and in a small group, we might have some impact on that. And I think everyone in the forum should take advantage when they get the opportunity to make an input into what's happening at the global level, at the high level international organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd, for work at multiple levels. And finally, Karen.
Yeah,
sorry, Karen, then Jack.
Yeah, I'd just like to acknowledge that repair is becoming quite a mainstream topic, and I'd like to acknowledge Callie and Carlo who've been leading the Repair Cafe work in Nelson recently. So yeah, great work's happening locally, but loads of but it's great to see it being talked about nationally at government level as well. So yeah, good stuff happening.
Thanks very much to you, Karen, and Callie, and all who are doing these remarkable repair events and getting the message across of lowering consumption. Jack.
Hi, everyone. I did a very short article for a local newspaper on how to set up a neighborhood car sharing, ride sharing program. And it was picked up by Stuff. And it was then picked up by Kate Malcolm, who organized a live session for the Richmond Library. I don't know whether the day, I can't remember the date, but it's toward the end of the month in September. And it should, if it's not already on our Ning website, it will be, and you can check it out. So if there's any interest in what you need to think about to set up a ride sharing, card sharing program within your neighborhood, amongst your neighbors, or you know people who might be interested in that, you can inform them of this session toward the end of September. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Okay, on to our young voices, and I need to bring Sophie onto the screen. Oh, there she is. Sophie,
hi.
over to you.
It's just me today, but
Okay.
So yeah, hi, I'm Sophie. I was mentioned earlier. I just do a little bit about me. I don't know how much time I've got, 10 minutes, I assume, but we're running a bit behind, so I'll try to be quick.
No, you got 10.
Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm an activist from Nelson. I've been involved with the Climate Forum since pretty much the very beginning, but I didn't get fully involved with any groups until this year, which has been a new experience and it's been quite fun. I'm now on the leadership board, or not sure what it's called, but I'm the youth representative, and I'm here to talk to you all about what we can be doing to get youth involved, also what youth can be doing. I mean, obviously, we can look around the room and acknowledge that there isn't any other young people here today that I know of. If there is, just let me know. But yeah, so there isn't many young people, at least, that are involved with the Climate Forum, and obviously we want to change that because we want a diverse set of opinions to be able to speak to the general public and get out there within the schools. And so yeah, part of my job, I guess, on the board is getting more youth involvement, and I've been kind of working on a few projects behind the scene about thinking about what we can be doing. So for me, one of the things that I've been kind of brainstorming is a workshop where people learn the basics about planting, because a lot of people are interested in growing their own plants. I'm not sure if you know, it's a very amongst young people, especially in Nelson, actually, a lot of people are interested in growing like monstera plants and lots of other plants like that. So being able to teach them how to properly plant plants and be able to do it in a small space, like an apartment, or if it's going to be outside, how to do it properly in the right season and that sort of stuff. So that's something I'm working on personally with Tim's Gardens, and it's quite a cool experience to be working alongside them with, and definitely want to get the Climate Forum involved with, so that we can get that engagement and really link it back to the Climate Forum. And I mean, for me, the aim is to really get people to understand that there's a lot available, I guess, at the Wednesday and Saturday markets. You know, if you're going to make a small change, that's probably one of the biggest things you can do by buying local, which a lot of people think doesn't really make an impact in the grand scheme of things. But if you think about it, you're cutting down a lot of your carbon emissions just by buying local. And that also goes hand in hand with buying sustainably. So for me, I kind of try to link it back to being vegan, which I know that isn't a possibility for everyone, but is something that we should be working towards because of the carbon footprint and how much land and resources it takes to have an animal on a plot of land. I know that a lot of people are conscious of that and are trying to use their land in the best way possible. And I mean, a lot of things for people living in the city are, you know, fast fashion, and also disposable cups. That's something recently that a lot of other places have been thinking about trying to get rid of. And we still see them a bit in Nelson, but it's definitely something we should work towards. And op shops, they're a great place to find clothes. And, you know, I've been talking to people about this, and a lot of young people op shop as well, which you might be just surprised to hear. But the problem is a lot of the op shops that they want to go to and the source for them are overcharging for what the items actually are, which you might have seen, but it's quite interesting that if you go to, I guess, the Salvation Army, you know, the clothes are quite a lot cheaper than Godzilla, which is very, it's more like a boutique for recycled clothes. So I know that young people want to be into that. So even if the Climate Forum would organize a clothing swap, and also holding meetings that cater to young people, because a lot of these big meetings can be quite intimidating, even for adults. I mean, sometimes it takes me, you know, a lot to come along because I'm not sure what to expect. And I know a lot of young people who want to get involved with things like these, but they want to be surrounded by other young people as well. And yeah, so we want to make sure that young people are getting involved, because we do have a bit of a problem around that. And I guess in the future, a lot of young people will be affected by the decisions that are made, I guess, in local government, in just the big government, and also, I'm just reading the chat as people were saying, and someone said their trousers were made 30 years ago, which is quite cool. Yeah, so a lot of, you know, a lot of people want to get involved, but we just have to make sure that we're catering towards them, because we can invite them along as much as we want, but in the end we have to be, I guess, an inclusive space. And I know that you all are lovely people, that's why I've stayed for so long, but we have to also make sure that they're surrounded by people that they, I guess, know and would, I guess, be comfortable around. So yeah, so my kind of goal is just to be setting up more youth events and then trying to get those people along to maybe mini meetings and then getting them into the big meetings so that they feel comfortable talking to everyone. I've had a few chats with people about this, and I don't know if we have time for questions if possible, because I know that a lot of people have questions that they would like to ask. I get them a lot when I'm at the meetings in real life, but it's a bit of a surprise we're in lockdown now. So yeah, is it okay? I've tried to leave a little bit of time for questions, about 2 minutes.
Go for it, Sophie. So anyone with questions for Sophie, and I'm going to have to try, use the little hand up sign, and I'll try to scan the 2 screens to see if there are questions for Sophie. Whoops.
Or I can see one from a person called Liv, which says, Sophie, is it an idea to set up a youth group for in the Climate Forum? I think it would be a great idea, but it's also a lot of organizing, and I would like to get maybe a few of my friends involved, so then we can organize it together, and I can just be the person on the board that can report back, because as you might be able to tell, there's a lot going on for me at the moment as well, and I want to make sure that these ideas are being pushed to their best ability and not being left behind.
Yep. So like I posted a question in the chat, and then you said, oh, there's time for questions. So I was wondering, because you have a few friends, but how do you of course you communicate as friends and stuff, but how, I think if you start with a group of friends, it might also be nice to involve more people into your group that are not per se your friends. So that's why I thought maybe just getting a friends group in the forum to kind of have them together and communicate together, so that if other young people, I'm 26, so I hope that I'm still considered young, would also okay. would also be able to join that group, instead of, because I of course was also oh yeah, well, I think I'm one of the youngest here, so yeah.
Yeah, completely understand, and I'm involved with young political parties. Well, one political party, but I have been involved with others in the past, and I think what would be, I guess, my aim, if I'm going to be, I guess, setting this up, is that we would want a few young people to get together, and then we would be able to, I guess, divide the roles up so that people can equally share those roles, and it's not just one person doing it all.
I'll text you my number, and we'll chat, and maybe we can set something up.
Sounds good.
That sounds
all right.
wonderful.
I can see some hands up.
Trinity Walker.
Kia ora. Sophie, just want to admire and acknowledge the mahi that you're doing, not just for the Climate Forum, but right through our communities. Just a quick question: how can the leadership team support you and the youth a bit more? What would you require from us to try and get your group established more?
I guess the only thing I'd need is just that sort of support from the Climate Forum, being able to, I mean, in a sort of metaphorical sense, put the logo on it, and be able to really push forward with that idea, so that we can just get the ball rolling. And also another idea that has been talked about a lot, which a lot of people are talking about, is going into schools. And I'm very keen to speak in schools and be a speaker. And I just want to be able to have that support from the Climate Forum when I do go in. So I know that the schools group, I need to get in contact with. Is that, I hope that kind of answered the question a little bit.
That sounds very promising, Sophie. Just a time for Sharon to ask her question, and then we'll move on to the next thing. So Sharon, go ahead.
Sorry, just having trouble unmuting. I laugh at other people when they have trouble, but I'm having trouble myself now. Serves me right. Thank you.
We can hear
very
you.
much, Sophie, for your mahi. I acknowledge you do an amazing job. I'm just wondering what groups we could link with, like Gen Zero or Schools for Climate Action. Are there any active sort of youth groups related to climate change in Nelson? Do you know?
I've been on a few demonstrations.
I think that I want to say there is, but it's not to the same extent that it was in, say, 2019. You mentioned like school strikes for climate. They're not as much of a group anymore from what I'm aware of, because there's been racial inequality within the group up in Auckland. So then most of the other groups kind of dispersed. I wasn't really involved with it, so I don't know too much about it, but I know that there's political groups, obviously, but I'm trying to think, but I don't think there really is. It's just a lot of individuals who don't really have a platform to be able to come back to. A discussion that was talked about a while ago was actually having a group for adults to be able to express their climate, like sadness and how the state of the world is. And I think something similar for young people might be good, because there's not anything like that. So yeah, getting that sort of younger group and then being able to bring them to these big meetings is kind of what I'm aiming for. You start with the small events and then you work your way up. That's okay.
Thanks, Sophie.
Sophie, you've really opened a door onto possibilities here, which I think many of us are eager to walk through that door and talk to you and see what we can shape up as a way of bringing together young people on this issue. And apologies to anyone who had their hand up and wanted to talk more about this. We'll try to make more opportunity for conversation and action in this arena. And thank you so much, Sophie, for speaking and opening up that door. We were able to take more time on this today because we don't have an art spot today and want to move straight on to our science spot with Liv Cornelison, who will now take over for 10 minutes. Over to you, Liv.
Yes, thanks. I'll share my screen. So this should work. It says it should supposed to work, but it doesn't. Wait, I'll just do it like this. I pretty much know it out of the top of my head. So yeah, I'm doing the presentation for the STAR group today. So as you said, I'm Liv Cornelison. I'm actually studying in the Netherlands at the moment, but everything is online and my husband is a Kiwi, so we moved here. And I'm studying climate physics, which is a combination of meteorology and oceanography, ice and climate and all sorts of things. And my focus will be on oceanography later in my studies. And that's why I'll do the presentation on sea level rise. So I'll tell you a little bit about the factors that contribute to sea level rise, tools that we have at the moment to predict it. Then, of course, I will zoom in on the Nelson-Tasman region and say a little bit about which regions are affected, what will happen and when, and also the policies that are kind of already in place, and then some other, flooding factors. So here you see a little graph that's from NOAA, which is a climate ocean research institute. From the US, and basically what we can see here is that it's mostly added water that's come from glaciers melting, ice caps melting, and that kind of stuff. But also a large part is from thermal expansion, which is not something everybody that thinks about sea level rise is the first thing they think about. So what does thermal expansion actually mean? Basically, when you've got water or any material, you heat it up and it expands. And that, of course, also happens with seawater. But as we can see here, it mostly happens in the middle of the ocean. That has the largest effect because it's got the largest water body. And near the coast, this effect is actually quite small. So my first thought was like, oh, well, then probably it evens out. So the extra water that comes in the middle of the ocean will move to the coast. But we've got a small experiment that shows that that actually doesn't happen. So I checked it out. And so here we've got 2 water tanks at the same temperature. This one gets heated up, which means that the water level rises. But we actually don't see that this water level evens out. And this is, of course, also because the mass of water in this tank is still the same as in this tank. So there's no gravity or anything that evens it out. And also the air pressure on both of the tanks, if you are the same. So that actually doesn't level out that much. So the sea level rise at the coast is not that much affected with thermal expansion as you would otherwise think. So meltwater is then the biggest problem. What this figure here on the left shows is that the ice caps from Antarctica have actually less effect on the sea level rise here in New Zealand than, for example, if Greenland would melt. And this is because an ice cap like Antarctica or Greenland has such a big mass that it has a little gravity field of its own. So it pulls the ocean towards itself. So if it melts, it kind of like evens out a little bit. The sea level rise in the northern hemisphere rises then more than in the southern hemisphere due to the gravity of Antarctica. So we actually kind of are more affected by the melting of Greenland and the mountain glaciers, which is also, I think, quite a cool little thing to know. All right, we'll go quickly to the tools. At the moment, I've looked at 2 tools. One is the NIWA coastal calculator, which is, of course, New Zealand based. And then there's also a globally model that is called the Coastal Climate Central. And I've quickly made a little screenshot on what you can see. I'll share the presentation in the comments, and all the links are in the comments of my presentation, so you can have a look at it later. But you can see that Motueka and Takaka and stuff are actually, and just north of Nelson, are mostly affected. And I'll zoom in a little bit, and I will use the New Zealand version from NIWA. So Tasman has 700 kilometers of coastline. So, well, of course, we all know that we're quite affected by sea level rise. So this is from the NIWA coastal calculator, and all the orange bars and the red bars are kind of the regions that are affected by erosion. So if sea levels are rising, the oceans are higher, and there's more erosion on the coast. So these are the higher risk regions, and we can see that almost the whole coast has quite a large already an erosion effect, and that will only increase by rising oceans. I'm zooming in on the 2 larger cities, towns in the Tasman region, and after that we'll go to Nelson as well. And this is when there's 0.5 meter of sea level rise. So this is the higher tide, that's what that means. And we can see these kind of like dotted lines are the regions that are most like they've got a chance to be affected, but they're not certain. While all these colored in regions are definitely affected when the sea level rises with only 0.5 meter. And we can see that Mapua and Motueka have quite a big impact. We've got, of course, a lot of farmland, but even the town center and the port from Motueka will have significant problems if we've got 0.5 meter of sea level rise. If we go to Nelson, this is what it is at the moment, and this is with 0.5 meter sea level rise. And we can see that, big regions are largely influenced. I'll zoom in on Nelson town. So these regions are not directly influenced when the sea level rise is higher, but of course with like super high tides, when there's also storms, these regions have a large effect of flooding. So when will this actually happen? So we've looked at the 0.5 meter sea level rise here. So I've made this line, and this will probably only happen in the second half of this century, which is quickly, but not that quickly. And I will tell a little bit later about other climate and flooding areas. But of course, we know that it's coming, and we know that probably we need to, sorry, I see comments coming up, so that's distracting me. So we know that it's coming, we kind of need to start thinking about, okay, what are we gonna do with this? So this information from the newer coastal calculator is actually already getting used by the Tasman District Council. I couldn't find that much about the Nelson District that quickly, but it's already getting looked at to see, project information, to see where we can build and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of already in use. But as we see on the right, this is the timeline from Tasman District. And we're here at the step was like, what matters most? And we're starting to discuss about what we can do about it. So still, like, we've got kind of the information, but we're not using it that much yet. Like, we're not at the developing or plan strategy yet, which is, I think we should start to get working on quickly, as of course, we're getting closer to the second half of this century. So there are also, of course, a lot of other flooding hazards, which is, I think, a problem that is more coming quickly than the actual sea level rise itself. But when the oceans are heating up, which we know that's happening, we get more extensive rainfall. Of course, when oceans are warmer, there's more evaporation, which creates more rain, and also with the heating of the atmosphere, rain will stay longer in one place. And that's why we had, for example, this huge amount of rain just a few weeks ago with the Buller River going far beyond its reach. So the conclusion of my little presentation is, yeah, sea level rise is worrying. We know what's happening, but it's not kind of the only problem, which is something I actually also would like to point out. So yeah, any questions?
Unfortunately, we didn't leave enough time for questions here.
Yeah.
I wonder if people could put their questions onto chat, and perhaps you could handle them on chat. And we need to find a way of getting this very valuable information onto our resources page on the website, Liv. That was very helpful, and thank you so much for putting that together. It's stuff that we need, and we also do need time to talk about it. So many thanks for starting that conversation, and we'll hope that it will be able to carry on.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Liv.
Thanks.
I see someone saying that it's Peter Olorencio saying that it was worth coming to the Hui just to hear that helpful presentation. Thank you. Okay, what we want to do with the next interval before taking a little break is to catch everyone up with the work of the Hui, particularly the team of Marlene and Anya and others who are working constantly on this stuff. So over to Marlene to catch
so
you up with lots of things.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody, and I'm really sorry. Could you hear me? Yeah? Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Because I had some connection problem this morning. So yeah, so I will share you a slide about just an update of what's going on, and just also to have your suggestion. And this update will be followed by an explanation by Anya about what's going on also in the communication team. And so I will share my screen. Yep. Can you see that? All right. Oh no. Sorry. My morning problems this morning. Sorry. It's not the good. So I think I won't be able to share my screen, otherwise we will lose too much time. So I'm really sorry. It's really not my morning.
It did come on, Marlene.
Okay, sorry?
Yes, good. We've got it.
Yeah. So it was just to remind you the weaving plan. So this weaving plan was presented. I mean, the process of doing it was presented at the last UI. So that there is a document available now on the website. And so, yeah, just to remind you, the aim of this document is just to know what's going on between the different groups and projects, because some projects are in both, I mean, in several groups. And also, in fact, it's a kind of document to let know what's happening in the forum. Just another way to share the information. We've got the celebration of success and the UI and the minutes of the UI, but the objective would be to have a kind of central document of everything that is happening. So it's an evolving document. And so last week I've done some updates. So inquiring into the groups what was going on. So I will not explain everything today because we don't have time. But everything is on the website. So the updated version is on the website under the resource tab. So you can have a look. So as a reminder, here are all the projects on the go. So some are doing really well, and some are a little bit in a pause for the moment. Some are struggling a little bit, but this update was interesting to do, to see where the problem were. So yeah, so where there are some problems, and I've talked to a few of you during this update. We'll try to find solutions to populate more and to make more publicity about your project. So that's something on the go in the team. And soon we'll have also a new team member to help us in that job. So that was just to let you know that I mean, the team was making the follow-up of that and was not letting you alone with all the projects on the go. Yeah, so that's it for that. So yeah, I invite you to go on the website to have a look. Last we had a brainstorming about how do we get the message of the climate change around the community, and also a subsequent question was how do we involve them. For those of you who were there, yeah, we had to answer 2 questions. So it was really a brainstorming, put all your ideas in the chat and then, but then now we've got these ideas, which is also on the website. So you can have a look. But now the challenge will be to follow up on that and see how we can do that. So for the moment, I've just done a spreadsheet, which is not really it's just the beginning. But yeah, the idea would be to gather your ideas about, complete this list, but also share the way you think it would be nice to approach a few people. If you've got specific tools I'm thinking like the schools, for instance, you've got a specific document that could be really helpful to reach them, things like that. And also, if you do some work, it would be nice to share it and record it. So, I mean, I know that the spreadsheet on the website is not the best way to do it, but you can always celebrate your success during the UIs. It's maybe the most simple way to do it. Or also just send us an email and we will maybe put it in the newsletter. Just find a way to move the information around. So that was just to let you know about this work in progress. And yeah, of course, we are open to suggestion. Maybe, I mean, we won't open a discussion about that, but if you've got suggestions, you can always add them in the chat. Or we are available under our email. And yeah, also another small request that I take the opportunity to share with you is that, as some of you already know, we've got a request of tracking of our volunteers' hours. So all the time you spend for the forum, it would be nice that in some way we can have a record of it. So it can be like presence sheets when you do a meeting, but also a kind of way of gathering that. For the moment, I'm working about a tool, an easy tool, and not an additional one. It has to be simple for everybody. I acknowledge that, but to record that. So yeah, also if you've got some suggestion, I've already received a few of them, but I'm still studying the best way before moving to a new thing, just so that it's easy for everybody. So yes, if you've got suggestion on the best way to do it, I'm really open to hear them. And in the meantime, I just ask you to begin to think of this collection of volunteers' hours. And also, yeah, so I will let Anya now talk about the communication update. So I will, yeah, I think, Anya, I will let you with that slide. Is it all right?
Yeah, that's great. Can everybody hear me?
Thank you, yes.
Okay, so we've got a lot going on. There's things in various stages of progress. The original communications plan that we inherited didn't really include any mention of social media. And we didn't really have key sort of talking points around the philosophical, what do we stand for, what do we want to do, personal, where are our stories, what's our who are we connecting with and who are we connecting from, and then the purposeful, like how are we putting these things into the practical sphere. So anyway, we've had Gemma come up with she's been working hard developing this content strategy that we're not quite ready to share yet, but we will be very soon. So just big shout out to Gemma for all her hard work on that. It's been amazing. And we want to build up more communication around the forum itself. Like, for example, just making clear the distinction between the levels of membership, subscribers, and then just the different components of the forum, how the forum really works, and just make it very, very clear to everybody how we operate and what our different components are all about. So Anne has been working hard on different lists, different databases of different levels of membership and subscription, so that we can actually target our communications a little bit more precisely to different audiences. One thing I'm really, and so thanks Anne for that, sorry. And one thing I'm really, really happy about is Robin has put her hand up. Thank you so much, Robin, to help me to to pull in some more stories and conduct interviews. So that's a very time-consuming job, is because people don't really like to answer emails now, do they? So just pulling in a lot more stories about, personal stories and about the effects of climate change on people and what they're doing, the good work that they're doing in their climate activism. So we're hoping to get a lot more stuff going there and a lot of positive engagement. Let me see. There is yeah. So we've got a lot of back and forth with local businesses and organizations at the moment in that realm that will feed into that stream. So that's great. We just need to actually get the stories out. Our Stratcom group has had a chat about school engagement, and the schools group will tell you that this is no sort of easy task to infiltrate schools, because they're so chock full of projects already. It's really, really hard to sort of get your hooks into them. But we've come up with an idea to get some more involvement, and is Enviro Schools active in the area? Yeah, so that's another organization that we need to tap into. So what we are hoping to do is get into schools, offer them something, at the very least a celebration of whatever climate stuff that they're doing at the moment. So it'll have a two-prong approach, I suppose. So we can actually make some relationships with the schools, and also find out actually what they're doing, so that we're not doubling up on work. But anyway, I'm probably talking too much about something that hasn't been fully formalized yet. But David Bartle, thanks David, has come up with some great ideas. And straight after the HUI, we are going to be having another little meeting with the schools group just to get these ideas sort of more structured and see how we're going to execute things. Our display is continuing. Currently it's and John Paul's screen is trapped in the Nelson Library under level 4. Sorry, John Paul, I know you want your screen back. But its next appearance will be in the Richmond Library, and we'll just keep that little display going around. So if anybody knows of a place where they want to put that, schools or whatever, let us know. We've got our own TV now. You'll be happy to know, John Paul, so we don't need to keep yours hostage anymore. And just we just want to say that Peter's stepped out of our group. He's going to be focusing on, okay, thanks John Paul. Peter's going to be focusing on some more creative stuff, which is great, but he has promised that we can nab him again if we ever need him. And I just want to say thank you so much, Peter, for everything you've done for the Stratcom group. And yes, you will be nabbed. There'll be no fear of that. You will be nabbed in the future. And everybody, if you've got any stories or any news, just keep us all in the loop. We love hearing about what you're doing. And yeah, it all feeds into information, stories, keeping us vital, keeping us relevant, keeping us interesting. So yeah, keep it all coming. Thank you very much. That's probably all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Anya, and thank you, Marlene. I will just mention that these two women work tirelessly, dedicated to the forum, and with great skill and intelligence. Thank you both very much, and all who work with you on these things. Okay, time for a break. I'm sure you're dying for some tea or coffee. Don't forget to move around or stretch or do some squats or a plank or something, and to be back at let's say 10:50 to hear Lindsay Wood, which is going to be extremely stimulating and push us forward on our way. So take a break, everyone, and be back at 10:50. Thank you.
I have to head off, but thank you for having me. If anyone else needs their emails passed on to me or wants to get in touch, just somebody will be able to pass it on if you say it in the chat. So if that works.
Thank you, Sophie.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for your participation, and we will be conversing on where to go with the ideas you presented. Many thanks.
So, Sophie.
Great. Could you give me some quick tips on the best things to say about you of the many things?
I can't think of anything good to say about me, Joanna. Yes, look, I would say that I'm someone who's got a long background in environmental architecture. 10 years ago, I redirected my practice with the idea of seeking multiplier effects across the breadth of the climate crisis. Probably people are hearing my introduction to myself anyway as we're talking. But the other thing would be that sometimes people say, what do I specialize in? And I say, I specialize in being a generalist. So does that give you enough to go on?
Yeah, right. And please add to it if I leave out anything important.
Thank you. Yep, I'm not too worried about painting a picture of me. There's other stuff to talk about. But thank you.
Sure. Good. Okay, it's just about time for people to be coming back.
You want to have a bit of theme music to play?
Yeah, good idea. That'd be a good idea.
About 3 years ago, I went to a cradle-to-cradle congress near Hamburg in Germany, and with everybody before the event, and they started this background music that had a wonderful beat to it, and slowly it got louder, and everybody suddenly realized this was the call to go to the auditorium. And it was like a wonderful, wow, something big's happening here. The music got bigger and everybody arrived on time. It was very clever.
That is really skillful.
And with a good spirit too. Not only did people arrive, but they had this feeling of being buoyed up for some sort of occasion. So I'd like a drum roll or something, please, Joanna.
Okay, let's see who we have here. In fact, I can't easily tell. I think, yeah, perhaps if the audio is working for people, perhaps I'll just give a little call. Would everyone like to come back together and we can start the next part of our program on climate action plans? Everyone who can hear me, please bring your cup of coffee or tea to the table, and so we can begin again. Okay.
No.
Not that?
No. Anything else on the chat stuff on the side?
Okay, where are we? 10:53. Lindsay, we will go. I will take the liberty of going 5 or so minutes over.
Sure. I've also got a little bit of a preamble to do, a very short one. So there's a little bit of breathing space there, if you like, to Joanna, before we get into the harder material.
All right. All right. Well, I think we do need to begin, and hopefully people are listening, even if your face isn't on the screen. It'll be good to see those faces back. I am delighted to introduce a friend of mine, Lindsay Wood, who has been associated with the forum from its early period. And Lindsay has a long career as an environmental architect. And 10 years ago, he made the decision to focus his work to create multiplier effects for maximum impact to respond to the climate crisis. Lindsay has ideas about a huge range of aspects of climate action, and is a very is a great fertilizer of ideas in others working on climate. So I'm delighted to have Lindsay here in the forum today to talk about both measuring our household emissions and developing climate action plans. Over to you, Lindsay.
Thanks, Joanna, and hello, everybody. Thanks for that lovely and gracious introduction, which you expanded on our little chat a few minutes ago. I also want to just give a heads up to the people that spoke before, to Liv and Sophie, who both gave wonderful segues into different things as well, and some of the ideas earlier on. Also, you kindly said I've been involved from early on in the forum, but of course, I'm there more in heart than in body, as it happens. I'd love to be more actively engaged, but I seem to be too good at generating commitments for myself anyway. So just briefly, what we'll do is I'll give a few minutes overview. I will try and be as compressed as I can, but it's always a bit hard to give the meaning of life in one sentence, isn't it? And then I'll touch base on the overview of the climate situation, where we're trying to get to, and a few little snippets or some pointers on developing our own climate action plans. I'm hoping everybody has had a chance to engage with the carbon calculators that we referred you to. And I know 1 or 2 people have engaged to the point that they've found that they don't actually align very well always. So that's another thing we'll come to in due course. Then we'll go into breakout groups. I'm hoping the technology is sorted on that, and we'll work. And there were the 5 great breakout groups, if you remember. There was food and waste and household energy and travel, and then a 5th one, which was a bit of a catch-all for some of the other things that may be more about talking than calculating. We might talk about data or buildings or a few other things. And then we'll come back with a plenary session where we share ideas from each of the groups, and then a little bit of a wrap up. And if we have time at the end, 2 things. We'll give people a chance to copy down notes off the chat session if there are ideas and things. And I'm also, during that time, happy to be part of a freewheeling discussion that will allow people to ask me questions or share things among themselves. I'm not trying to be the center of all of that, but it'd be sometimes nice to have a bit of a chat. But Joanna will have to make the call if we have time for that. So at this point, I'd like to share my screen. No, I'll just do one thing. As I sat down this morning on the chair I'm on now, I sat on this cushion. Now, you probably can't read what that says on it, but it was given to me by one of my daughters a few years ago, and it says, "Life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. And I think that's a wonderful segue into what we're looking at in a way with climate change and the climate crisis. So let's get on with my presentation. And here we go. I'll just flick that up to full screen. Are we seeing that okay?
No.
Can you see that okay?
We don't see the screen.
So are you seeing my PowerPoint?
No.
No.
Okay. I'll have another go. Thank you. Is that looking better?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
we'll go up to full size. There we are. How's that looking now?
Perfect.
Very good.
Okay, great. So you'll see that so the zero carbon, here we come is what I've titled it. It's a pickup from a previous series of workshops we ran, and is trying to decarbonize ourselves a problem, or can we look at it as an opportunity? And you'll see that I've actually added in there learning to dance in the rain. I like that as a theme. If anybody was at the Annesbrook Church a couple of years ago when Sir Jonathan Porritt gave a talk, you may remember his sort of general theme of his talk was he was going to take us to a dark place, but then hopefully finish in a good one. And I'm going to take a bit of a leaf out of Sir Jonathan's book there. And I mean, I don't think we can talk about the climate crisis without it facing up to the fact that it's got a very formidable dimensions ahead for us, without compounding it with things like resource depletion and energy descent and so on. But in the end, we have to have something that we can take forward. And that's in very big part what the climate action planning process is about. So here's where I'm going to start. First of all is this, and my apologies, some of you will actually know this material better than I will, some people maybe not, but to put it in context about, in this case, carbon dioxide, this is a graph from NASA, and it shows over the nearly 1 million years, 800,000 years, it shows the seesawing or sawtooth of carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere for that time. Please note that the highest level in throughout that nearly 1 million years is 300 parts per million. The other thing is that here's about when humans arrived on the scene, you know, plus or minus tens of thousands of years. And if we look inside the circle there, that's the era known as the Holocene. And it's essentially the period since the last ice age, about 12,000 years ago. And it is really the section of all of history which it frames civilization as we know it. That's when agriculture started, that's when serious cities started and forms of government and culture and so on as we know them. So that's the spot in time when, if you like, humanity as we know it has emerged from the longer history. Now, just in the time, and that's where carbon dioxide was there about the time I was born. And here's what's happened in my lifetime. The carbon dioxide levels have increased about 40%. That's enough, but if they keep going at the present rate, in one more lifetime, they're going to head up to about there. So they're going to more than double the $1 million historical maximum, sorry, 1 million year historical maximum, just in the space of a couple of lifetimes. And so the thing that we have to be clear of here is that we are living in conditions far outside human experience, and they're worsening rapidly. And even if we stopped tomorrow issuing all the greenhouse gases, we've still got roughly 20 years of ongoing escalation of this problem with us. So that's scene one. What's caused that? Well, my mouse is clicking. One is lots more greenhouse gases. Here's a bit of a track of what's happened with carbon dioxide in history. It's not the only greenhouse gas. The different colors are different areas of the planet, North Africa and America and China and so on. And so in the 250 odd years since the Industrial Revolution started, you can see what's happened to the greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a very big part of it. However, There's another part that's not so much talked about. Oh, I'm sorry. Luckily, a bit like being a binge eater, there's lots that we can cut out there if we're using energy and emissions so flagrantly, we can actually then wind up with a lot that we can hopefully cut out. But there is another dimension, what's caused that, I've called it two, and that's the global deforestation. And this doesn't get quite as much attention as I think it perhaps should do. This is just New Zealand, but in fact, it does have a reflection of what's happened throughout the world. If we go back to pre-Maori times on the left, the green shows the forestry cover. And then by the time the Europeans arrived, in other words, in the period, the pre-European period, tangata whenua actually cleared about 6.7 million hectares. And then since then, with the Europeans here, that's increased with another 8 million hectares. So we've actually cleared round about 15 million hectares, or some, getting on for 60% of our land area is being cleared of trees. If to put that in context, in terms of our emissions, the contributing effect of that deforestation is sometimes somewhere around about 2 or 3 times all of our current emissions. So if, for example, all of that land was back in forest, it would actually soak up all of our current society's emissions times a factor of 2 or 3. So that's another opportunity. This is stuff we can stop cutting down more trees and we can plant. Now, I will say other things about trees in a minute, but the basic thing is that that's another part of this equation of why we're having so much problems with increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So just to finish the bit of the recap, how might that look so that we can keep eating below the crucial 1.5 degrees C? A few people earlier this morning talked about the IPCC latest report, the 6th assessment, and how dire it is. And in some ways, what it's saying is what we always knew is, there's no doubt about it. There wasn't an awful lot of new information, but there was an awful lot of saying, hey, this is for real, and what we've been saying before is right. So for 200 years of escalating greenhouse gas under profuse fossil fuel usage and our fixation on growth and consumer society, it's left us at 2020, that's the date from an IPCC report, at this point here. And here's the trajectory that the IPCC has mapped out in order for us to have a chance of keeping temperature under 1.5 degrees C. What does that mean? It means that we're here at the moment in 2020 or 2021, a bit further on. We have to get to, we've heard of net zero by 2050, and that's the rate of descent. So in 29 years, we have to decarbonize what we've added in 200 years of fossil fuels, plus a history of deforestation. That amounts to about 10% every year, year on year. That's a thing that governments rarely have their head around, and is a huge challenge that we really have to face up to. So if we look at that, decarbonising 10% year on year, here's where I'm picking up on Jonathan Porritt and saying, okay, let's go to a dark place looking ahead 20 or 30 years. Very little will be the same. Very little of life as we know it. If we do very well, and if we have a lot of luck, then here are some things that we might expect. We will have hopefully passed peak CO2. We will be no longer building up more greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and our ecosystems are regenerating. There was a bit of talk about that earlier on. Hopefully we'll have food supplies without too many famines. We will be forced into a low energy circular economy, and that is likely to involve more manual work than we are expecting these days. Things like our clothing and our buildings will become more modest. If we're lucky, we'll have a stable government, but there's lots of forces around that may destabilize it. And we'll also sustain basic services like health and law and order and so on. And then the transport scene, it'd be great if we had workable public transport. I don't think we can expect to have much in the way of private cars. Maybe if things go well, we might suddenly find that electric bikes and electric scooters and so on actually are still carrying us in the right direction. And if we look at a darker place, and if we don't do well or have bad luck, well, I don't want to go there, but I do want to say that so far we haven't done well. We all know that. And we have had bad luck if we factor in, for example, the COVID situation. That's a setback that we didn't need at all sorts of levels, including climate. So what's the message here? We have to pull out all the stops to sort this. That's already been said a few times this morning. We must turn this problem into an opportunity. Now, that's a theme I want to emphasize in a depressing environment. Seeing this problem as an opportunity, I think, offers us a lot of motivation and a lot of promise. So, seeing problems as opportunities, I wonder if Ibrahim Hamadou can show us. I don't know if anybody has been watching the Paralympics. His problem is he's got no arms, and his opportunity is to play Paralympics table tennis. And if you haven't seen it, here is Ibrahim playing table tennis at world-class level. He holds the bat in his mouth, he throws the ball up. That little white blob there is the ball going up. He throws it up with his feet, and then he plays stunning table tennis. So I say, talk about dancing in the rain. I think that's an inspirational thing that we can carry forward to say it's not just about overcoming a difficulty, but leaving us in a good space to actually do really worthwhile things. So coming back to the climate situation, seeing problems as opportunities, sure, this is how I think we could perhaps look on this. And some of you may have seen this slide before. Zero carbon, here we come. We're going to be heading that way anyway. Let's face it as a challenge and see it as a worthwhile thing with rewards on the way, not just a grim process of letting go of all the things that we really like. So now it's our turn to do our bit, and this is us getting to the workshop stage. We have to cut our own emissions, but there's another thing there, and I emphasize this, we have to urge others to do the same. Doing our own bit is critical, but if we don't spread the word out, it's a little bit like Sophie was saying before about there's a whole lot of young people that we're not quite engaging, and we're looking for a way to do that. If we can get one more person to move in this direction, we've doubled the effect that we're having. But there is a caveat. I said I'd come back to trees. Planting trees does not make emitting stuff okay. We have to cut every emission we can and only then offset with trees. There's a lot of criticism around about the phrase net zero because it conveys the idea that we can keep living our profligate lifestyles as long as we plant enough trees to suck up the carbon. And in a way, I almost hinted at that when I was talking about deforestation. But the reality is that's not going to cut it. There are all sorts of other things going on that I won't go into now. But if we just accept that we have to do everything we can to cut emissions and then offset the rest with trees, and that's the rest being just what's left. So let's now take a step closer to that. Some of you will know that our Zero Carbon Act and the Climate Change Commission are built on the IPCC's graph there, trying to get us to a 1.5 degree limit to global warming. So the IPCC has been charged with recommending to government 3 stages of emissions budgets every 5 years in round figures, stepping down. The first one is to be firm, then there's a tight one subject to minor adjustment, then it's still a tight one, but a bit more adjustment. Now, I just want to step sideways for a moment. This is exactly where we're at right now in our government process. The Climate Change Commission has reported with its recommendations to government, and government is considering these, and by the end of this year, must make its announcement as to what the targets are that are going to come into law. So I said before, one of our roles is to get other people to do stuff. And this is a time when I think we've all got to step forward and say to our MP, don't go soft on this. You mustn't soften the targets. There's already been criticism that some of the Climate Change Commission's targets are a bit soft. We can't afford to have the government softening them more. Okay, back on these stepping stones. So then in 5 years' time, they introduce another firm one and 2 more tighter ones, and they do the same again and the same again, until eventually, if all goes to plan, we get down to net zero by 2050. And in some ways, those stepping stones echo a little bit of what I'm going to suggest we do with our own personal climate action plans in trying to decarbonize our own individual bits and pieces. We may not do it in 5-year steps like that. I'm suggesting we think of 1-year steps, but the principle is the same, that progressively we keep producing more and more on the way down. So here I'm just going to go through a few slides quickly to just give a bit of a feel for different ways of tackling this. So let's start with sweat the small stuff. We must automatically think reduce emissions. We must repair things. That's already been talked about. It's wonderful. So the old reduce, reuse, recycle, there's a lot of saying that recycling is really waste and drag. We should be saying reduce, reuse, repair as the other R that we should be using. That will also have financial advantages as well. Very important with small things that we embed habits. If you've got to fly, don't think, shall I press the offset button? Just press it when you're booking online. There's a wonderful book by a lady called Carolyn Arnold called Small Move, Big Change that goes very well into that. Here's another sort of thought. Organize the day and save time and waste and driving. How often do we get home and think, oh, I forgot to pick up so-and-so and have to go back to the dairy or wherever it is. And as I've just mentioned before, add your voice to one climate issue. It doesn't have to be that you're trying to save the world, but it might be that you just pick one issue up, like saying to your MP, hey, I want you to really step up on the Climate Change Commission's targets. So that's sweat the small stuff. Here's an example. We all know kitchen paper towels, although best if we don't use them. But if we do, have a go at tearing them in half. Long ways, not across the way, they don't tear so well. And then you can use a half-size bit. And by that simple step, you have halved the emissions of that process. So it's a lot about a mindset. Here's another one. Thanks, Domino's Pizzas. Domino's aren't world leaders in sort of advanced cuisine or anything, but here's a picture from their online menu showing 3 vegetarian pizzas and 4 vegan ones. You can't imagine them being around 5 years ago, or not so many. But then have a look at this one here. You probably can't read that. If I blow that up, what does it say? It says plant-based beef. And so you'll find that almost every one of those Domino's pizzas now has plant-based beef in it. Serious long-term vegetarians might say, but we don't need plant-based beef. We can actually just have plant-based stuff. But the point is to get everybody on the journey. This is, in my view, a major step. So good on you, Domino's. And I think you'll find that echoes things happening all around the world. So if we relate that to this graph here, which is there are different versions of this, but it's one lot of carbon footprints from eating. You'll see along the bottom, meat lover, average, no beef, vegetarian, and vegan. If I try and plug that switch from a meat lover's pizza there to a vegetarian pizza, here's what it would do approximately to the emissions. I know that's very rough, but it gives you a feel that suddenly we've cut nearly 50% out of our emissions from that pizza choice. People with maths will query the exactitude of that, but the principle remains the same. So now I want to go to the medium stuff. That was looking at some smaller stuff. Change commuter habits. These are, again, this is not a definitive list, it's just some examples. Suss out how to have a lower carbon holiday. Ensure your next vehicle isn't fossil fuel only. That's very important. Maybe go to a solar water heater or a low flow shower. Delay purchasing new stuff. Hang on to shoes a bit longer. Hang on to a phone a bit longer, etc. Subsidize your adult kids into EVs. For several years now, I've said to my kids, when you change your vehicle, I'll give you 10 grand to help you get into an electric vehicle. And so far, 2 out of 3 have taken me up on that, which is wonderful. So here's a travel example of changing travel patterns. This is from the BBC. Just they've got a graph that compares a whole lot of different ways of flying. These figures are in grams of carbon dioxide per passenger kilometer traveled. I've noted there that there are 3 there that seem strange beside each other. They're all for diesel. So you've got a train there, much the same as a car with 4 passengers in it. But if you go to an electric train, such as the Eurostar, it suddenly goes dramatically less. So I don't expect people to take this on board. I just want you to be aware that there are these sort of comparisons. And when you're looking at travel, these are things you can work with. Now, one thing that I should mention is when we're in the breakout groups, I'll perhaps put these up for a few minutes each so that people can have a look at some of these if they wish. That's just to highlight the difference between someone driving on their own versus someone with passengers in the car. Huge difference. It's not exactly rocket science, is it? But it's still worth seeing it there. So now finally the big stuff. Look the big stuff in the eye. And this is big stuff in terms of where's society going, where's the planet going. We have to think about what careers our kids are going into or our grandkids are going into, and encourage them to find careers that make sense in the future. If they're looking at wanting to be a diesel mechanic and we're phasing out diesels, that's not so sensible. If we're thinking they're going to be a specialist builder in building for the circular economy, that may be much more sensible. So there's a big shift in what lies ahead and how people might be working. Review where you're living and live somewhere where you drive much less or are much less car dependent. And here's an interesting one: get free of the guilt, shame, consumer treadmill. Now, if you read about marketing of products and the consumer society, you'll find a lot of marketing is built around trying to make people feel bad about the fact that they've got something old and not new and so on. Good on you, Jill, for having those 30-year-old trousers on. That's a great example. I've talked about prioritizing funds to climate-proof your family and also consider climate activism. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, what would I be doing now? It would not have been spending myself almost full-time on climate activism. That's a thing that I've changed because of the need that I feel. I'm not saying you have to do that, but consider at least getting more engaged. And of course, being in the forum, people are already on that journey to a degree. So there we are. If we do all of that, I hope we don't have to do it again, but it's a nice sentiment anyway. So where are we getting at? We're at the point now where please choose a breakout group for one part of your carbon footprinting. There they are listed there. Work with that group for about 20 minutes or 25 minutes to explore reduction strategies just for that one. Remember, we're trying to look, for 10% per year. And then each group will report back with ideas and key strategies and questions into a plenary session. And you will need to identify someone in your group who can take on board that they know they're going to have to report back, which will be fairly brief. Okay, on that note, I think I will stop sharing my screen. And we'll come back to things here in a little while. Okay, thank you. That's
Thank
me.
you, Lindsay.
So
thank
are
you
we
very
handing
much.
over now to the groups?
Yes, we hope that Marlene and Anya can now offer us breakout groups. We'll just wait for them to. Okay.
Good on, that's good.
Normally you can choose.
Marlena? No. Ah.
How are we going?
Just about everyone seems to have disappeared, Lindsay. I don't know what happened there.
I don't know whether they've disappeared into chat rooms and into breakout rooms or disappeared to go off and make a coffee or something. Can you tell us, Anya?
I've lost the I've lost the tag.
Sorry, the volume was a bit low. I missed that.
Hi, it didn't let us pick our rooms, so I'm gonna retry. And I don't know who heard that, if only my breakout room heard that or if everyone did. So okay, so I can't. I'm just gonna mute here so you don't hear the workings of my feeble mind. Hang on.
Oh, no. I got to see Mira. Woo!
Oh, okay.
That was, we only just began. What happened?
Yeah, what did happen?
I think
I've been disappeared. Okay.
We're in groups and now we're not.
Oops.
Okay.
So is this the main menu for the food group? Is it?
No, I think we're coming back to main group.
Yeah, we've got everybody here.
It's been taken back. Something happened.
I'll have to
explain. Sorry, we are just sorting that with Anya. So the idea, sorry, Anya, I speak to everybody. So the idea was that everybody could choose its breakout room. So I don't know what happened. So we're just trying to put you back in the room in order that you can choose the one you want to go. If it's not possible,
yeah, I figured that one out. It says do you want to join this group? And if you say no, you see in the bottom row you see the breakup rooms, and then you can actually say on the right side join. So if you
so you can choose in fact your rooms.
Yeah. So you need to say no, I don't want to join this one that you're assigned to, and then you can choose.
Okay, so I will tell that to Anya because she's in the comment because I can't. But
so the way I did it before was okay, was it?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, right. Sorry. Okay, right. We'll do that again then.
Yeah, except it shut itself down after a minute, so there must be somewhere some sort of
I
timer.
shut it down because Marlena said that it had assigned the rooms, but we can change them if we want, so that's okay.
But if
okay, here we go. Let's try that again.
Okay.
Say not now.
Why not?
I want to go and see the waste people. And then it should go down here. And then go to, if you go down, scrolling. So we can then join the waste one if we want to.
How do you join? I can't see how I'm joining. I can see the list, but I can't see the join.
I can't see the list. All I've got is just join waste group.
Press not now. And at the bottom, there's a little icon where next door to the normal things like the chat, this breakout room. Then you get a list, but I can't seem to join the list.
Yeah, I've got actually the same problem as you, so that's why I'm trying to. But some people look to have this possibility.
If you look,
so I will.
Excuse me. If you look at the list,
and
then look to the right-hand edge of the list, it shows a little number.
Ah, yeah, right, got that. Thank you.
Okay.
Well done.
But did anyone else get an opportunity to, or does anyone have something they want to share about their waste?
So sorry. So for you in this room, you're just also trying to find the room. Is it sorted for you?
Can I say something that I didn't want to be in this group? The only option I had was being in this group. How can I change that?
Joan, are you there? I see you're unmuted.
I think my microphone doesn't work.
Well, I don't have a camera, but I've got a mic. To be honest with you, I'm lost in this process. I don't know what group we ended up in.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Joan.
Okay, my mic is working then. I thought it wasn't. So, yeah. Yes,
Yeah,
I wasn't sure which breakout group to go to because, you know, I'd like to have comments in each of them. And I was just waiting to hear the results of what came out of them, really.
Well, we've lost several people. It seems like there's only 2 of us left in this group, and I don't know what the group is. It's all a bit confusing.
It is a bit, yeah. I just sort of given up. Okay. Well, the last thing I looked at was an other group, which was, you know, a possibility of anything we could talk about.
Whereabouts are you finding these groups? That's sort of lost on me.
Right, there was a menu actually, and you could join, and I joined the travel group to start with.
Oh, I didn't see any menu. Where did you see the menu?
Well, on the screen.
Okay.
But it came up because there was a button to press saying breakout groups, and so I pressed the button and got the menu.
Okay, I didn't see any of that on my screen.
Okay, well, it's obviously that the computer business that's a bit iffy, isn't it?
Well,
what were you wanting to discuss anyway?
Well, I could go to any group, I guess. I thought maybe household waste, and I don't know if that's the group I'm in or not.
No, I don't know either. Didn't sort of opt for any particular group at the last time I looked at the menu. But I thought of, I'd be interested to hear what other people had to say,
Right.
what they wanted to say.
Well,
about
I
it.
never even got the menu, so it's all, I'm all lost.
Right. Well, just you and I talk about it. What do you see in terms of reducing? Got any ideas of what you would reduce for whatever of the menus that were there anyway? You said household waste. How would you reduce household waste?
Well, did you go in and try any of the tools that they suggested we could go in and put our own information on?
When was that?
They were online by the agenda. It was a link.
I didn't. I'm afraid I was hoping that Lindsay was going to explain about the different options we had for assessing our carbon footprint for the house.
Yeah, they gave links, I think, to about 2 or 3 so-called calculators.
I just wanted his feedback on what one could do about the various things, I suppose.
Right.
But,
well, I went to 2 of them, and they have different things in them. So obviously you get different answers. Yeah.
I get flummoxed by the computer because when it says they have copied the link to a link, I don't know where the link is that I can open to find the copy. I did actually get one of the links. I got a copy of their how to calculate the carbon footprint, and I've used that, but I couldn't get the other copies. So I've just done one. Right. Well, I was very keen to promote the City Council collecting food waste and stopping it from going to the waste stream by composting it. And so I have joined the community compost group, which collects a bucket every week of the kitchen waste. And so I feel I'm doing my bit, and I see that they're doing a trial and have a lot of people now doing that to help the waste stream not going to the can't think of the word.
The landfill. The landfill.
Landfill, yes.
They had a pilot project. Is the pilot project now over?
I'm not sure if it's over, but it's certainly working. And you have to pay, unfortunately, at the moment to get them to collect your bucket. But I don't know whether the council will do it for free eventually or not. But they were trying it out.
Right, they had a pilot.
A lot of people doing it.
They had assigned a random group of people, I think, to be in the pilot. But I hadn't heard exactly if that was complete or not.
No.
Well,
one of the things that I am always irritable about is that we don't get the information about what's going on. And if this pilot group's been going for quite some time, which it has, we're not hearing anything about the results from it or how well it's going or whether this could be enlarged to cover the whole city or anything. And I think the communication is the thing that I'm concerned about always. There's just not enough toing and froing of information.
Right.
And I understand it's very difficult because not everybody looks at the website and not everybody listens to or watches Facebook. And, we do get the free newspaper, but not everybody reads it. So it's a difficult situation, I understand.
How did you join the food pickup waste? I know you said you pay. How did you actually join that? Did you apply to join it?
Yes, there was an advertisement in the paper.
Okay.
And this was some time ago. We've been doing it. My neighbour and I share a bucket because I don't have enough for one bucket. And then I asked recently, because I was not, my neighbour was away, and I wanted to fill the bucket, about putting in shredded paper, which the city council didn't collect out of my waste, my recycling. And they said, oh, they'll be very happy to have lots of shredded paper. So I thought that was another bit of information which was useful, but isn't spread around as well.
Right. Well, we have compost bins at home, and all of my kitchen food waste, that waste goes into my compost bin. So that's something I do myself. But my big issue is the garden waste, because the garden waste is a much bigger volume than I can manage in my compost bins.
Sure.
And some of it's fairly woody, and rose cuttings are very woody. And so what happens is, and I know it's not correct, but it ends up in my wheelie bin and ends up in the landfill. So my garden waste is going to the landfill, which is not good. But I can't compost it at home. So my thing has been for a long time, not that I've done anything about it, like with the city council, but there should be at least one or two places where you can go with your green waste from your garden and dump it off, and the city would make it into compost. And you wouldn't have to pay to dump it off. You just go, and that's how it used to be in California, where we lived until we moved back here. The town had a waste area where all the city waste went, but you could drive up with your garden waste and literally just dump it, shovel it off the back of your vehicle for free, and they took care of it. There's nothing like that here that I'm aware of, where you can get rid of your green waste and it be made into compost.
I think because I've been in the area for a long time, and we lived out beyond Richmond at one point. We had a bigger property, and we used to take green waste down to the Richmond dump at the end of Beach Road. And I can't remember whether we had to pay or not, but they were certainly accepting green waste for making compost.
Okay.
But we had to take it ourselves. Well, I'm not able to take green waste, but again, my neighbour and I share the green waste bin, which is run by Nelmac, and we have to pay, but every fortnight they take our green waste bin, and I understand it goes to a composting facility. Again, this is because we, in our current way of doing things here, they're trying to give private businesses the money, aren't they? Instead of the city council taking the responsibility and doing it and not charging people, then private businesses step in and charge.
Yes, well, that's the piece I've never been clear about. What happened to the green waste from your yard? Is it composted, or does it end up in the landfill? That's the piece I've never found out about. Now, when we first came here, which was about 5 years ago, my husband put a small load of green waste in the back of the car, and then it was sitting in there for a couple of days, and I'm like, well, this is silly. I need to get rid of this. And I went to the Vivian Street, where all the rubbish and recycling and stuff goes. And I was shocked to be charged $15 for my very small amount of green waste in the back of the car. And I drove and put it in like a big hole in the ground. The point is, what happens to that green waste? Do they actually compost it or what? That's the piece I don't understand about.
It's my understanding that they do, but I'm not 100% sure. And I think it's worth us making a fuss and asking about it.
Well, the point is, if they make the compost, do they sell it to anyone? What happens to it?
Right. Well, we can buy compost, of course, and through the garden centres and so on.
But what happens to the green waste that they process, like at your Richmond area or in Nelson?
They used to have, years ago, there was a big freezing works, which means it was a place where they killed, well, they still do, killed stock. And they had great big grounds around where they used some of the waste from the killing together with green waste to make compost. And you could see these great mounds of sort of brown stuff steaming away out there. And you could go and buy some of the this street compost for your garden, but that's gone. And again, I'm not sure, you know, what, and I think it's one of the questions we should start asking after this forum, to find out exactly what happens to the green waste and what happens to the compost. But again, I'm still concerned that it's the private sector which steps in and says, oh yes, we'll do it, but they charge. And I think, you know, the city council should be taking the responsibility to do this, and they could sell the compost.
Well, when years ago, as I said, 5 years ago, when we came here, I went online looking to get a, you know, waste collection. And I went with Nelmac with a small wheelie bin because it looked like it was fairly competitive price-wise at that time. Of course, it's gone up since. But after my experience of my $15, getting rid of a little bit of green waste out of the back of my car, I decided that's too expensive. And we don't have a trailer, you know, we can't get a big load. So that's when I started putting my green waste in my wheelie bin. But of course it goes to the landfill, which isn't really where it belongs. And so I'm you know, I'm concerned in a sense about my practices.
Sure. I mean, I agree. And, you know, I think
now I could get a green bin, a fairly large one that they pick up every 2 weeks, but at the time I didn't sign up for that. Maybe that's what I should be doing.
But we need to check, don't we, that it's being composted.
It would be nice, yeah.
And we need to check what happens to the compost. I mean, is it sold through places like Mitre 10? The community compost, the buckets from the kitchen waste being composted is sold, and it's sold through Tim's Garden Centre. They sell buckets of it from that. They've used some wood products as well. They get some waste from the timber industry, and they mix that with the kitchen waste and compost, and you can buy bags of, or no, it's actually buckets of compost. They're recyclable buckets that you buy and use and take the bucket back, type of thing. But it's fairly expensive even then. So, you know, whatever happens, we seem to have to be paying
for it.
I can't use a compost bin really because I haven't got enough garden that I could put the compost on. I don't think, because it's, you know, fairly fully occupied with ground cover and all sorts of things.
Well, that's part of my trouble. I generate my own compost. I have 2 bins side by side. So one's cooking and one you're filling. But I don't have a lot of use for my own compost. So I sort of dump it in a corner of the yard and have it as a borrow area, you know, because, you know how it is.
And anyway, I started with a compost bin, but also didn't have the right mix. You have to have, you know, the right amount of nitrogen.
You've got to have the carbon and you've got to have the nitrogen in the right ratios. And what
I was just not doing it conscientiously enough.
What I use for the carbon is sawdust. When my husband uses the table saw and cuts up the firewood, I sweep up the sawdust and I put that in. You have to have that to go with your green stuff from the kitchen.
So it's not straightforward. I mean, the council does help people to, or encourage people to make compost, but it's not as straightforward as all that, and you do have to have places to use it once it's ready as well.
So since it's just you and me chatting, we've talked a fair amount about the waste, which is a concern. The other calculator I went to had some different sections. The first calculator didn't include diet. The second one did.
Yeah.
And what I discovered, and you probably know this anyway, we eat meat once a day. We're not vegetarians.
No.
And when I put in the calculator, you know, that we eat meat once a day, well, you can imagine what happened to my carbon footprint.
Yeah.
It went sky high.
Right.
So that tells me that eating meat once a day has a big impact on your carbon footprint.
Right.
As
well,
I said,
yeah.
You probably know that anyway.
Well, we hear that a lot, yes. I'm not sure. I mean, it sounds as if you not only said you're an omnivore, but that there was some way of knowing how much carbon dioxide that's likely to produce. And I haven't really, this is why I wanted to come and hear Lindsay, because I've only got the figures of how, you know, what I'm an omnivore, but I am tending to be vegetarian as well. I mean, you can be half and half sort of thing. But I'm not sure of the actual carbon dioxide footprint that involves. So I wanted him to be explaining how we work that out. So
yeah, we're producing
shouldn't
red
we be
meat.
going back to the main screen? I mean, it seems as though we've been on this for
Well,
quite
I don't
some
know
time.
how long they were giving these groups.
No. Oh, there's Lindsay.
There's Lindsay now. He's appeared on my screen.
Yeah. Hi, I'm here. I'm in the general room now, aren't I?
We don't know what room we're in.
No,
Hi. So hi, Lindsay.
Hi, Marlene.
So we are calling everybody back now.
All
or
right.
join
Okay.
there?
Well, thank you for that conversation.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm with Anya because Anya is managing. So thanks to her, I can do that. So Joanna, normally everybody's coming back now.
Okay. And is everyone coming back, or do we need to
in
close
60 seconds? She's closed the rooms.
Oh,
I'm
great. Okay.
in the phone with her because I think the phone is the best tool.
Okay.
So Anya, I'm in the main room.
Oh, look at that. The
Oh,
room's
good.
filling up.
Okay. That's working. So as soon as people are back, Lindsay, will you conduct the closing or the feedback time, and we'll just we'll go a little bit over our closing time.
And so if we give everybody 3 or 4 minutes for 5 groups, that gives us about 20 minutes for feedback. Is that okay? 3 or 4 minutes, and then a little bit at the end to tidy it up. How does that sound?
Yep, that sounds pretty good.
Thank you. Well done. Just while we're here, nice to see you, Chris, from Masterton, or from coming in from the Wairarapa. And we've got people from Australia too, I gathered before. That's great.
We're world famous.
I don't know what happened there.
Yeah.
I think I saw Lisa Brinson, and I think she's from the other coast, from over in Kapiti Coast.
Oh, there she is.
Yeah.
Hi, Lisa.
I was
Well, she's
over.
here now.
I was in the Hutt Valley, but I am now in Nelson.
Oh,
Sunny
wow.
Nelson.
Nice.
Been away for a
Marlene,
couple of years and moved down here.
Marlene, can you let me know when you think everybody's back, please?
Everybody, I think we are 39, so I think
Okay,
we can say
that's
that
great.
everything is closed.
Rightio. Thank you, everybody. Well, I'm picking up the threads now. We're into a plenary session. This is going to be interesting. I haven't run one of these before on Zoom, so that's really good. Hopefully each group appointed someone to be their spokesperson, and if they didn't, maybe someone would frantically think now, oh, I better write some notes and put my hand up. So what we're going to do is we're going to have about 3 minutes for each of the 5 groups, just to try get a bit of feedback. I'll try and do a little bit of wrap up. And included in that, we're asking for you to try and nominate a key strategy that your group might have come up with that you feel is worth sharing. You won't be able to get all the ideas, and hopefully our chat session and our other sessions will allow us to collate those and distribute them separately, so you don't have to cover the field. So I might just take the list that in the order that I've got in here. And can we start with the group that looked at household energy, please? And we'll give you 3 minutes starting from now. Who's anybody going to put their hand up for that? Thanks.
Okay, try to go quickly.
Please.
Yeah, there's one of the important things was the idea that this whole process of doing an energy audit or a carbon audit is a really useful way of engaging in conversations with people who may not be familiar with, what to do and how to do it. So it provides a framework to do that. And there's lots of things that can be done, switching, reducing transport needs, using electric vehicles if possible, cars or bikes, scooters, PV panels, reduce meat, no stupid market shopping or reduce stupid market shopping, cycling, no flying, all of those things. One of the things that was noted was that in place of energy, it takes time to do some of these things that otherwise we use energy for. And in some ways it slows things down, but it also gives you time to think and enjoy things in a way that you might not otherwise if you're speeding things up. We talked about emphasizing the benefits of change, not just the difficulties inherent in change, but how to save money from car sharing or ride sharing, for example, and the health benefits of eating less meat and eating local and vegetarian and so on. And we also talked about moving beyond the actual measurement of our carbon at an individual, or household, or even business level, and petitioning government to take even more drastic action than they have, for example, by rationing fossil fuel supplies as the surest way of actually reducing things rather than leaving it to market demand to change it, which is what the ETS and even carbon taxes are about. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Really interesting. That's good coverage and food for thought. Okay, we're now going to flick on to the travel group. I don't know who's putting their hand up for the travel group, but here's your moment.
Hi,
Thanks,
it's
Hi.
me. A great group and some really interesting conversations from what we might think of as the macro, the personal, right through to the international. And it is a big spectrum about travel because we are known to be, big international travellers and are contributing to that ongoing emissions. So many people biking, that's great. Many people walking more. Many people even using motorbikes. But also this tension between balancing a lifestyle need, which might be international family, international work, and then how do we mitigate or adapt our life to try and either reduce that or change it. So some really creative options that are coming around, the use of electrics, and that's got its own tension because it takes energy to generate electric opportunities as well. So very much questioning and keeping open to the possibilities of how do we keep that balance of needing to move around and yet wanting to reduce our impacts and trying to find ways to creatively do that. So just some random ideas as well, which is, why can't we have the America's Cup foil boats taking us across the Tasman even, instead of having to take a plane? I've posted in the chat box a story I saw recently about a wind-driven sailboat from Sweden, which is moving cargo around. So, there are many travel alternatives in the bigger scheme of global stuff happening, and yet how do we keep? And one idea, I remember having carless days back when petrol supplies back in the maybe late 70s, early 80s, and it was all dependent on the number on your number plate, even days, it was once a week, you know, through to, you know, why don't we just close petrol stations? And once that happens, it forces people into finding options. One of the big ones, though, that came across many in the group was the public transport networks are just as much about social interactions as well as actual transport, and how can we keep putting pressure on systems which, especially in a region like this, from one side of it to the other, how do we meet those public transport needs a whole lot more efficiently? Because a lot of people are willing, but it's just so inconvenient and not working in any kind of ongoing efficient way. I think that pretty much sums it.
Thank you so much, Kendra. That's great. One of the things that jumped into my mind before we quickly go to the next one is, in that mix of how we're going to travel and international families and so on, maybe we have to be rethinking or talking to our kids about whether international families are such a good idea anymore if we want to be able to preserve those family links. You know, I talked about the future proofing and the long distance. It's a horrible thought, but I'd like to keep going on fascinating stuff, but we're going to have to go on to the next group now, which is waste. Who's going to be the spokesperson for waste? Anybody got their hand up for that? I can only see half the group here at the moment.
Shall I take that?
Thank you. I'm not sure. Is that Yakal, is it?
Yeah. G'day, Lindsay.
Hi, Yakal. Thank you.
Very good. I'd say on the whole, our group focused a lot on the daily waste we see streaming through our households. We began talking about some of the observations we had and challenges we had, particularly from our personal perspective, that probably about a third of our waste is plastics that go to recycling, and then what's left in the rubbish bag is mostly soft plastics. So a big issue there. Liv explained that in the property they are now, they don't have a direct outlet for food waste, that they no longer have composting access. I was wondering, do we have those services locally? So these are niggles that you feel day to day. There's quite a lot going on locally and around the country to continue finding outlets for these plastics and for increasing food programs such as community composting and Nelson trialing of 52 households. But we're not really striking at the problem, which is at the source and in the awareness sphere. And so our conversation ended around how we can better deploy solutions to the community, and whether that's, for example, rural drop-off locations for plastics waste and recycling, and whether it's perhaps greater awareness around our community that at the moment under level 4, all of our recycling is going to landfill because it can't be sorted. And through awareness, people could make the decision to wait before they drop it off. Now we talked about the need for education and whether that could occur through, for example, we've talked today in this meeting about, for example, JP's screen up representing the Nelson Tasman Climate Forum and some informationals and a couple of spots. What would it actually look like for our local council to take responsibility and deploy a series of screens throughout town to provide thought prompts around waste culture, material reuse, and so forth, and or whether someone like the forum can raise the bar of that. We're very glad to have Trinity in our group from TDC, and so she explained that these are conversations which are going on, but as with a lot of these issues, one of the key things we can do is to support our elected officials and our hardworking staff in council, those who are batting for the climate and waste and energy side of things, support them so that their conversations have weight and that we actually see these changes come through in real action. Trudy was very careful to point out that these are absolutely conversations that are going on, but sometimes it can be terribly frustrating achieving the action to match them.
Thanks, Yakal. Can I close off your session there just to keep going? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Really interesting. Now we're flicking on to the food group. I didn't get a chance to join the food group, unfortunately. I called into 3 of the others, I think. So who's speaking for the food group?
I'll be the spokesperson for food. So we started off, we're talking about basically rather than buying, say, milk, is it better to buy local milk that you can, obtain through reusable containers, or is it better to go plant-based? And I think our group, a lot of our issues at the start was, well, there's no sort of perfect solution, and there's a lot of uncertainty about what is the best thing that we can be doing. So really, I guess the overarching strategy from our group was you got to make sure you have fun. I mean, at the end of the day, everyone likes eating, everyone likes food. So basically, there are a few cool initiatives that the group talked about. Changing to 1 plant-based meal per day. Going to like local markets is quite a social thing as well. Sourcing local food. Obviously that also growing your own food, which you can do in community groups or in allotments, so you can kind of learn. There's community orchards around Nelson. You can make your own. We talked about making your own dairy products, such as yogurt or supplements such as oat milk. And then a really key thing as well that something I hadn't considered was also sort of advocating for your food options and diets for like local health professionals and DHBs to actually recommend. I learned about what a planetary diet is. It's a healthy diet that is also sustainable, and that should be accessible for everyone. So another fun idea as well was sharing actually these ideas as well, like maybe have a dinner party. You can have friends, you can have colleagues, neighbors, family, show them what a plant-based meal is. They might think it's actually delicious. And then, you get to have a bit of a conversation about that as well.
Thanks, Charlie. That's great. Lovely. Always heaps to talk about. And I'm sure you cropped up in there. I see Hannah's face there. So the good food group, I'm sure, is in the mix as well. What a great initiative that is. Okay, I think we're now, where are we at? We're now moving on to other. And I think Bruce drew the short straw. At least he was either going to speak or delegate someone else to speak. So Bruce, over to you.
Yeah, couldn't find anyone, so you've got me. And there were just 4 of us. We had to cover other, which means kind of everything else in the world, which was quite a big ask. So I'll zip through a quick list. We mentioned population and the impact on climate, and also the idea of perhaps getting people used to the idea of we might need to look at taking climate refugees in New Zealand from the Pacific, but also related to that, the need to engage with Maori on this. So not completely straightforward. Next was the energy impact of comms, including, I understand that if we turn our faces off on Zoom, we're using a bit less energy, lower emissions than if we show our faces. Also, some website pages show the emissions related to that page. We spoke about energy descent, including an article that some of you may have seen recently with a name like Through the Eye of a Needle, and the challenges there. We talked about household pets and how they can be sacred cows, and the one thing that perhaps do have quite high emissions, but difficult to talk about when people are attached to them. So not sure what the strategy is there. We did talk about just finding a link with people to, even people who aren't engaged in climate issues, to find something in common. We talked about trapping of possums, etc., in native bush and other trees, and the positive impact for the climate there. And we talked about protecting trees, which might be on private property, and so then can only really be protected by the owner of that property at that time, and sort of guarding against the idea that some trees might be regarded as a nuisance because someone parks under them and birds poop on them, or they might be considered dangerous because a branch might fall off sometime and create some potential risk. The trees have value and need to deserve their protection. As an overall strategy, I think the only thing I can say is try everything, but measure as well. And some things might be far more worthwhile than others because if we actually quantify the impacts related to that, some of the answers might be obvious. That's me.
Thank you, Bruce. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for also being succinct in what you were saying. Joanna or Marlene, can you tell me how much time I've got for a sum up at this stage, or have I run out of time?
Just keep it as succinct as you can, Lindsay. Thank you.
That'll be an hour. Thanks, Joanna. Okay. Hey, thanks, everybody. I was busy jotting down thoughts that came into my mind. I'm not going to try and sum up the sum ups, but a few messages that have come through to me are: the calculation is important, but it's difficult, and it's even harder to take the calculation and translate it into an actual strategy. So at this point, I suppose I'm going to throw a bit of a challenge out there that I doubt whether anybody has come to this point thinking, here are the steps I'm going to do when I get home. So I think one of the things I'd encourage people is to try, while it's a bit fresh in our minds, to take that step and think, okay, I'm going to give that a go. But the other thing, I'm very, very interested to know the perceptions of the calculation tools. They're not all that reliable. They also seem to have other purposes, like stimulating conversation or a way of getting other people engaged. So I think there's real work to be done, maybe within the forum or another group of us, because I'm involved with developing carbon tools to try and evaluate them and come up with consistency and feedback into the forum's handbook. One of the things that came through a bit to me listening to groups was, I think we're quite a lot of us trying to think of finding ways of doing the same things only differently. So if we still want to do a lot of travel, but we want to do it in sailing boats, or we still want to have the same level of activity, social activity, but we're going to do it in electric vehicles. And I just wonder if we have to get our heads around a bit more the fact that some of those things are going to shrink, that we actually are on a trajectory for them to diminish rather than keep doing the same things, just with a few different things. In waste, one of the things that I keep coming back to in my head, and Karen Driver will know this from joint projects we've been involved with, is I think there's a whole lot of hidden waste that we don't factor in very easily. For example, when we buy fuel, if, for example, our fuel came from tar sands, petrol that we put in the car, say, came from tar sands or fracking, it might have a radically huge and waste footprint in the place that it was sourced from, but our emissions only count the emissions that come out from burning the fuel in our car. I think I'm an architect, and I know there's at least one other architect here. If we design a building that's oversized, that isn't normally called waste, but it's waste. And a bit the same if when we buy food, we all know there's a lot of food waste back in the food chain. So there's that hidden waste that I think we have to be mindful of. Several groups flagged co-benefits. Someone said, look, food's got to be fun, and that's brilliant. If we have good planet and health-friendly food that's also a joy to eat, what a wonderful outcome that is. And the same applies in other areas too. So I think having this co-benefit, and particularly the sense of, it's that dancing in the rain thing, isn't it? This isn't actually all bad news. There's some really good news there. I do want to make a comment about milks. There were some interesting comments on milks, and I may be a touch out of date, but a couple of years ago in Climate Matters, I did a comparison of milks and New Zealand dairy as against international dairy, and I even dealt with researchers in Oxford a little bit on it. And our New Zealand cow's milk doesn't stack up emissions-wise too badly compared with oat milk and almond milk and so on. So I think we have to be a bit careful about automatically assuming that one of the plant substitutes is better for emissions. It may be better in other areas like water consumption or land use or whatever. So I just want to flag that. I'd be interested to get up to date on that again. I want to go right back to Sophie's comment at the beginning. Sophie's not with us anymore, and talking about how we want to try and have an avenue or a platform that is inviting for young people to engage with. I'd like us to take on board, I know that's not my little session, but I'd like us to try and take on board the idea that this, I think this applies everywhere. It's the same with tangata whenua, it's the same with farmers, it's the same with people who love driving their utes around, you know, and I think one of our challenges is to try and find ways of building those bridges with the people who perhaps don't really want a bridge built to them. And I don't know how we do that. I believe there's a good book, How to Talk About Climate Change or something. Somebody may know more about that than I do. I think in closing, I just want to say I was really struck by the wonderful array of intellect and skills and passion and so on in the group, even though I've only enjoyed snippets of it. And just more power to the forum. I think it's a wonderful vehicle. Unfortunately, it's one that we know it's an endless job, and we can multiply it 20 times and still find more to do. But thank you very much to the organisers for making this happen. Thank you also for making the breakout rooms work. And Marlene and Anya, that was a triumph against adversity, which is exactly the sort of model that we need at the moment. I think on that note, I'll hand it back to you and say thank you very much, and look forward to where we unfold from here. Oh, one final thing, Joanna or Marlene, we did talk at one stage about leaving this open now for a quarter of an hour, 20 minutes for a free-for-all discussion and people to record off chat. Is that what you'd like to happen, or do you want to move on in another direction?
No, we will close this session with the warmest thanks to you, Lindsay, for a very vibrant workshop.
Thank you.
And the chat, two things parallel. The chat will be open for about 20 minutes after closure of the meeting, so that you can catch up on comments that have been made that you haven't had time to read, and for the spokespeople of the group to enter some of their ideas onto chat. And Lindsay has kindly agreed to be available for about 20 minutes after the closure of the meeting. So whereas if we were doing this face-to-face, you'd cluster around the speaker's podium and wait to ask him your question. Now you can just all be in the room and ask Lindsay questions that you might wish to have, or make suggestions that you have. So I will close the forum with a closing karakia, which I've used on other occasions. It's used to end a waka journey. So here we are at the shore and climbing out onto the beach. Ko te hā, ko te rā, ko tangaroa, ko te mana, ko te kotahitanga o ngā mata waka. Homie, hui, taiki. Thank you, everyone.
Kia ora. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, everybody.
Hey, Modi.
Lindsay, a little comment that I wanted to make is about pets. I have a neighbor dog, highly enthusiastic and lively, who lives on a vegan diet.
Wonderful. I remember house sitting a dog, and they had like a rice sausage that they used to live off. So I don't know. I'd like to know what a vet's view of canine health is, or feline health in those circumstances. But yeah, interesting, isn't it?
It is indeed. I'm going to take off to read the chat now.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to hang around and take questions. Sorry, Marlene, carry on.
you can go. I've got just a proposition for the discussion. I mean, because we are still a big group, so either, and you know, we can keep the discussion in this big group, but it's maybe possible also to make some other breakout rooms, if you know, like to try to do like a real we. I mean, unless everybody wants to stay with Lindsay and have this conversation, but it's just up to you. So just ask if you want some breakout rooms, if you want to have a special discussion with somebody, if you want. Anyway, so I'll let it with you now.
Can I suggest you form a couple of breakout rooms, Marlene, and then partly it gives people the choice, and then if they don't want to stay with me, they don't have to feel guilty about disappearing.
We can save the chat, can't we, Marlene? How do you save the chat?
So it will be recorded, so it will be in the minutes.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I'm not sure about that's why I suggested that every interesting link that was put on the breakout rooms chat would be added in the main chat.
Right.
So we are sure that they are recorded, because I'm not sure about the breakout rooms chat.
Yeah, hi, Robin. You're on mute.
Just saying goodbye. We have to go.
Okay, cheerio. Nice to see you both.
Could I just say that I think that article, Through the Eye of a Needle, I put the link on the chat, is really like must read stuff, because it's sort of about the long-term future as well, kind of how how this is all going to play out for great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren. So yeah, it could be a game changer for how we operate the forum, really, in some ways, or what we promote.
Well, thank you. I don't know whether Jenny's still with us, but it was Jenny that I think might have circulated that. So
yes, she did.
Yeah,
yes.
A good point, Peter. Does anybody want Peter to elaborate a little bit on the content of that article? Or have you put Chris does. So would you mind just sort of, I know it's a very hard thing to encapsulate, but just give a few pointers as to what it covers. And also, can I check, did you put a link to the article? Did you say you did do that?
Yes, I've just put that in the chat.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, it's an academic research article done by two researchers at the University of British Columbia, and it came out on a website called MOPI, and it's an online energies magazine, and it's called Through the Eye of a Needle, an eco-heterodox perspective on the renewable energy transition. And it talks about how all the manufacture of our current technologies for gathering renewable energy is extremely, the manufacturing process is extremely high temperature, and it requires fossil fuels to do it. And so which we're in a way at the present level of the technologies, which are quite carbon intensive, footprinted. Yeah. And so they go into quite a, well, I guess some people would say it's a radical view, or the radical change that needs to happen over the long term about the actual longevity of renewable energy technologies. Yeah, that they may well be just temporary fix until the population comes down, and they estimate a population of 1 billion in the long term, not 8 billion. Yeah,
it's staggering, isn't it?
Yes.
Thank you.
So
Peter.
yes, it's well worth reading, I think the forum generally we would need to discuss the implications of it.
To give one example, I did a paper just 2 or 3 weeks ago, also to government, on on the big picture of the scale of energy, electricity generation. And Chris here is at the foot of the Tararuas where the big wind farms are up there. So you know about them a bit, Chris, but broadly to transition our economy as it is and with projected growth and so on to electrification, and just using wind turbines as an example, we need to install one big wind turbine. That's a 3 to 5 megawatt turbine every 3 or 4 days forever. Now you think, why forever? Because the thing is, if we put one in now and we do the others for 25 years, at that time, that's about the projected life of the first one. So it now needs replacing. So we roll like that. The foundation of a typical wind turbine like that is a block of concrete that's about 400 cubic meters. That's 15 meters by 15 by 2 thick. And that's equivalent to about 10 or 20 houses, depending on the construction of the house, 30 houses. So, you know, again, in 25 years' time, will the new wind turbine be able to sit on the old foundation, or do we have to pour another 400 cubic meters of concrete every 3 days to do that? I won't dwell more on that, but that's the sort of scale of electrification that we might need. And you might well find that you put up 20 wind turbines, and 2 or 3 of them are just needed to generate the electricity to build the other one. So, you know, there's an element of a, not exactly self-defeating, but self-compromising process in there anyway. So thank you, Peter. Does anybody want to chip in on what Peter said? Bruno, you're on mute at the moment.
Sorry, I don't want to chip in on that. I've got another point. I'll just leave it for this one to finish, and then I'll come in.
Okay, thanks. Anything else on energy and the eye of the needle? Yep. Fiona, and it's not Fiona. Fiona. I can't quite see. Hi.
So a lot of people complain about how high their electricity bills are, and yet they leave lights on, they use a lot of appliances, they boil a full jug when they're only having 1 cup of tea, they waste hot water. So I think we can actually do a lot in a household to decrease the amount of energy we use. You know, when I was living in Australia, the expectation, if you wanted to kind of be a good global citizen, was to use 4 kilowatts per day per person. That assumes that your hot water is being heated by gas, which is obviously not sustainable, but that's how a lot of Aussies heat their water. But yeah, I don't see anything in the currency, you know, across the broad media or even within the climate change media much about actually decreasing how much we use on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and I think that's a valid point, and it ties in a little bit to one of my closing comments, doesn't it? That the issue of we're trying to think of ways of doing the same thing without doing it differently. I agree totally with you. There's a saying that you might have heard of called negawatts, and negawatts are saving electricity rather than generating more electricity. And it's long been said that it's actually cheaper to save electricity than it is to generate more, even if you have to do something like put in a low flow shower. I'm completely with you. I think we're very profligate, and we'll need our arm twisting up our back, in my view, before we really take the right steps on that. I don't know whether that's a pricing arm or a legislative arm or whatever.
Yes, I could segue from that really easily if you'd like.
Please, yeah, go for it, Bruno.
Well, there's this issue then, of course, it comes up all the time, is what can individuals do, which may be minor, and what can groups do, which could be major. So this is like the multiplication effect you talk about. Now, I'm really interested in the handout you gave out for the meeting, the carbon footprint stuff, because and I have no reason to assume that this is not correct, because I think I got it from either The Guardian or the BBC News, one or other of those, is that those carbon footprints were developed by the oil industry, because they wanted to put the responsibility onto people rather than on them. And if you look at smoking, for example, as you got a good analogy there, if we blame the people for their smoking, then you know, like, they'll stop. Of course they don't, because they're addicted to it, they're into it, they're doing it all the time. Is it not actually the companies that make the cigarettes, the companies that make the smokes, the companies that now produce the oil, that are the ones that actually are the ones that who are responsible for this mess we're in? That's just a question.
Chris, go for it.
Lindsay, there was an article I read just recently that those that's coming into question now with some of those big oil companies like BP and Exxon and they're the Scope 3 emissions that they need to reduce. And one of the American companies has vowed to try and tackle those stage 3 emissions.
Thank you.
I'd like to sort of amplify what Bruno was talking about, I guess. So we have an interesting, analysis of our personal usage, and I think you did a good job of it, Lindsay, not dwelling over much on little tweaks of our individual usage, but just sort of looking at that in terms of maybe a national or global perspective. But Bruno brings up, I think, a really great point, and which is that we are going to go over the falls if we count on having just individuals change their usage profile to accommodate the climate crisis. We have gone past that. We've been listening to that now for maybe almost 50 years. People saying, oh yes, just live a good personal lifestyle and write your parliamentarian and write letters and things like this. This really has come to a head. At this point, we are a little bit past that. At this point, we're at a position at which we have critical tripping points that are either going to be met or not going to be met. And I would argue, and I think Bruno's arguing this, is that they're really not going to be met by allowing for a voluntary transition. That we really at this point need broad mandates, broad policy decisions, and that is perhaps the only way, and to whatever political reality is right now, the scientific reality, the evidentiary reality is that we are bumping up against planetary limits. There are going to cause us go into a tailspin of hurt, and that is, so I think we've gone beyond this argument to a certain extent, and I think you handled it well, Lindsay. But I do think that we're on a new level of urgency, and it requires us to look to pass. And I just want to make one point. If you look at the cars that are commuting people to the port every day, 2/3 of the cars that come to the port are single occupant utes. You know that the climate forum has got a long way to go. We aren't going to, we're in an echo chamber right here. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Jace. Just before I go to David, who's got his hand up, I just want to make a bit of a comment that I don't think we should fall in the trap of it's an either or. It's either a big picture or an individual one. I think we have to move on every front we possibly can. And if I pick up on your comment about the low occupancy cars, I mean, I think commuter congestion is one of the absolute idiocies of humankind. And we know it's wrong. And so I think, as well as the issues of, where are the oil companies in this and where are the automotive companies, I think there's a big human nature thing in there too. And somewhere along the line, we have to try and work on everything. So that's my take, my initial response there, Jace. Thank you. David.
Good points.
My comment was very similar to what Lindsay's just been saying, namely that it's not either or. Basically, I see the use of carbon calculators and footprint calculators as being primarily to engage in conversations, starting with neighbors and other people we know in the community, in order to actually shift thinking. And that thinking shift is really, really important, because it's the thinking shift that actually validates things like changes that happen at an organizational level, changes that happen at government level nationally. because if we don't actually change people's thinking about the way that they're approaching everything, they won't validate anything which is being done at government level. And as a result, our ability to move and change is going to be significantly compromised. So all of these things fit together and they're all valuable. I don't think any one of them can be said to be no longer necessary. It's a part of a chain of, or part of a web and network of connections.
Thanks, David.
Maybe if I can come in there, Lindsay. I wonder whether what we've got to think about is not the tipping points that we need to avoid. It's the tipping points we need to get to, and that's the one between our ears, isn't it?
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for that. I guess as David was talking, a couple of other things came to my mind, and it does relate to what you said, Jace. In my view, one of the Achilles heels of nearly all the policy and all the government rhetoric and so on is that it's all aimed at very big actions. It's talking about electrifying the transport system, or a new form of electricity generation or something like that. And there's almost nothing in government policy about even educating small players, individuals, let alone actually giving them a pathway to do things differently. We're a nation of small businesses, and there's virtually nothing out there to help our small businesses get their head around how can we do things differently. So I think I've for a long time championed the idea that we have to also give a lift up for small businesses. I'm sure many of you know about the Business for Climate Action 1,000 building challenge, 1,000 business challenge, trying to get 1,000 local businesses to have their carbon footprint measured. That's a brilliant objective. I know COVID got in the way and so on, but that's something that's terrific in that area. So,
Lindsay, I'd like to respond to that. The reason that we do not have a really groundswell of businesses making significant changes is because there isn't the infrastructure to make those changes. So those broad governmental programs that create the possibility for businesses to actually make significant changes to the way they do business. Right now, there isn't, you can count on your hands, one hand, the way that businesses can really, make small adjustments. But they need to make big adjustments. Obviously, we need to have, electric delivery fleets, and we need to get rid of the traffic congestion, which means massive overhauls to the way that we operate our cities and the way that we operate our communities. That has to happen from a central location. I realize I take David's point. It is it's grassroots up as well, but at this point we need those big. I think a lot of people agree now. We have climate emergencies. That's not. We've matured in that idea. We need transition. We need transformative programs.
I just pick that up. Sorry. Can I just pick that up too, and carry on from what Jace is saying? Lindsay, you were saying, look at the waste of time that people spend in cars during congestion. Look, it's impossible to get people out of cars. Why would you waste in Auckland 3 hours sitting in the car, and Nelson's sitting there for maybe 20 minutes? People don't care. They just do it. So I don't know whether it's easy. I think it's almost going to be impossible to change people getting out of cars, and that's why I'm suggesting that yes, we should work on that. But the big picture thing is we have to actually do something about the freely available oil and coal and gas and so on in our society, and that isn't done by individuals.
And Lord help us, the All Blacks have not only just got sponsorship from big petrochemical company, but I just got an international email last night. You may be aware of it, that a huge French construction company has become their front of jersey sponsor. And this construction company specializes in building oil terminals and things like that. So the All Blacks are well and truly in that journey. I'm mindful there are a few people who've been watching and nodding heads but haven't had a chance to speak. I'd be really interested to hear from other people who've stayed on with this group to see what you would like to chip in on.
Lindsay, what's the viability of having solar panels on every roof?
Yeah, thanks, Julian. I mean, technically it's viable. There's a cost thing, but you have to be a bit careful that the solar panels are on roofs that generate reasonably efficiently, because it doesn't take much of an angle pointing the wrong way or much of some other structure casting a shadow or something to really knock the efficiency of them. And the other thing about solar panels is that they generate a lot of power, but at a time which is not the peak power usage. So if they're driving the building that they're on, that's great. You know, for example, if it's a school with it on and they run the school, that's wonderful. Then at the weekends and holidays, it's supplying power back to the grid. But if it's on a roof which is quiet during the day, like a house roof and everybody's away, then it's going back into the grid at a time when the grid doesn't much need that electricity. They've had that in South Australia, for example. They've now had days when the supply of renewable electricity has totally exceeded the demand, and the wholesale price has gone negative at those times, which is quite, I mean, in one stage, great, that's a good triumph. But so if you add to that, then you need a way of storing electricity that's generated to be released at a time when the peak demands are on. And one of the aspects there is, okay, we might be able to hold back on our hydro schemes. Ideally, we hold back on coal-fired generation, which has gone ballistic, hasn't it? But solar panels are great, but they do create issues of when they're available, when their power's available versus when the peak's available. There are other things that go on there too, but I won't spend more time on that. Any other comments on that? Marlene, are you okay with us keeping chatting?
Yeah, it's just that there is another meeting at 1 o'clock, so that would be the deadline.
Okay, should we give ourselves 5 minutes to wrap up, team? How does that sound?
Yeah.
It's great that people said, and who haven't we heard from? A couple there that we haven't heard from? Matthias or Peter, are you still with us, Peter? Yes, you are moving there.
Yeah, can I just ask, Lindsay, you mentioned in your slideshow that COVID was sort of the last thing we needed in the crisis, or we had bad luck and that sort of thing. I feel like COVID has rattled, you know, it's not a pleasant thing, but it has rattled quite a few people and woken them up and looked at how tourism was totally over the top in New Zealand and having some hope for other things to happen. Also, of course, it is sobering that you can see how much people can, you know, sacrifice and change. And I mean, it's been done, said a lot of times, so I don't have to repeat it. So people make changes, you know, if it's, you know, if their own skin is sort of involved. But it's also sobering, of course, from the likes of yourself and most of the group, is that in 2020 we reduced our consumption and footprint, I guess, worldwide about 7 or 8% or something. So if you're now needing to reduce by 10% on top of that every year, it really shows how difficult it is. And I mean, if you tell the people, well, you have to live like you lived under COVID, plus another COVID, plus another COVID on top of it each year, how much buy-in do you expect? So I don't think that the COVID itself was a bad thing for humanity at all in reflection in this, but it does show a little bit how illusionary a lot of our goals are, to me anyway.
Yeah, perhaps I didn't explain it as well as I'd hoped, Matthias, and thanks for your comments. The point I was just trying to make is that the journey is a challenging one as it is. You know, I put that in the, if we do very well and we have good luck. And something like COVID, if you've got a strategy coming along, I think you have to see it as bad luck. It's a knockback. And the general feeling, I think, among climate strategy people is that the funding that's now gone into COVID recovery or survival and recovery is funding that is almost impossible to make available for climate strategies. It's wonderful if you can bring the two together, but that's the exception rather than the rule. Therefore, fiscally, COVID has been a big drain on the mental energy as well as the funding that might be available for it. But I'm with you. You know, you talk to people and saying, well, we've got to do that every year, year on year. I think one of our challenges, or one of my challenges, and I don't know that I do it at all well, is how can we say to people, hey, there are better ways of achieving that. We don't want it to be like it was under COVID. We actually we want it in a way that we can have really attractive lifestyles and still decarbonize. And I think that's, I mean, it's like pie in the sky in one way, and another way that's the sort of the ultimate yes answer if we can get there. So I don't know, that's a bit of a waffle, I'm sorry, but Peter.
Dear people, I'm afraid we are going to have to end this. I know that people have lots of interesting stuff to say, and hopefully we can address things in future fora. So Marlene and others have to get themselves ready for another meeting on schools, and let's thank Lindsay very much. Lindsay, thanks for staying on for more questions.
It's been enjoyable. It's been enjoyable.
We've enjoyed you very much, and thanks everybody for your active and intelligent participation in all of this. Marlene.
No, I just want to add that, I mean, I'm checking and I'm not sure it's working, but there is always a link that all the members can, a Zoom link that all the members can use that is on the website. So if you want to have another appointment between to go on with this conversation, I think it's possible. I mean, maybe not now, because I'm not sure we can use this link with our meeting. But yeah, I don't want to stop any good conversation. So if you want to go on, or let's say if you want to take the lead on that, or I don't know if there is interest on going on and organizing a follow-up of this conversation. I'm happy to organize it.
Thanks,
can't you just put us in a breakout room and then continue your other meeting?
No, I don't think it's possible. I'm sorry. I mean, in fact, we just tried to log into the other meeting, and it's not possible to log into the other meeting while this one is on the go. So that's not possible. But I mean, our meeting is until 2:30. So if you want to go on from 3 o'clock, it will be free. So it's.
I think maybe let's retire while we're on a roll, shall we? Rather than, and I think it's been a great session, but we could keep going for another 24 hours and we still wouldn't reach the end. So I just want to thank everybody for their energy and engagement from around the country. Great to see you, Chris, and everybody else too. Thank you so much for what you've done. We'll catch you again. We'll have another session, I'm sure. And thanks, Marlene and Joanna. Okay, go well. Okay. Take care.
Thanks, Lindsay, and everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Joanna, is it possible to join that school meeting?
Yeah, who's talking?
Bruno here.
Bruno's talking.
Yeah. So yeah, I will send you the link then. I mean,
okay, cool.
Everybody's welcome. But yeah, okay.
Yes. Can you send it to me too, please?
Okay. Okay. I'll do that.
Don't quite close the. How will we get that when you close it down?
Sorry?
How will we get that link if you close the chat down?
Oh, I will send the email to you.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, great. And maybe include me if you would too, please.
Okay, but do I have your email?
Just crisp, CHRISP @wise.net.nz.
I didn't get it, but
oh, okay.
All right. So Joanna, you've got. I will find it.
Yeah, never mind. Okay.
All right.
Look, I'll do that.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll send it to Chris.
And Peter and Bruno, I just forward you the email.
Yeah.
That I've got.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Bye. Hi, Joanna. Nice to see you.
Good to see you, Peter. I always enjoyed seeing you there.
Yeah. And nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just. Okay. Anya, are you there?